People always ask me, how could you leave college and still succeed? But the story didn't begin in a classroom. It began on a quiet street in Atlanta. In a small house with a garden and a kitchen that always smelled like freshly baked bread. My name is Leela, I'm 33 now. And if you met me today, you'd see a confident woman running a creative business empire. But my childhood was nothing like this. My parents, a mechanical engineer father and a high school teacher mother, had very clear expectations. Study hard, attend a prestigious university, and secure a stable career. My younger siblings, Noah and Sophie, followed the plan perfectly, earning all the praise and approval. I couldn't fit into that mold. While other kids were learning piano or playing soccer, I spent hours tinkering with old computers in the basement, designing tiny DIY projects or selling handmade crafts. Everything from hand-painted cards and bracelets to small baked goods became my little business experiments. My parents, especially my father, constantly shook their heads. Leela, enough with these games. Focus on your studies. None of this will help you in the real world, he would say, but I didn't listen. I was drawn to building my own little world, experimenting with ideas that excited me. By age 10, I had set up a lemonade stand in front of our house, complete with a menu of flavors and loyalty cards for regular customers. By 13, I was fixing laptops for neighbors for a fraction of the price of the local repair shops. To my parents, these were just hobbies. They didn't see the spark behind them. High school was my laboratory. While classmates prepared college applications and joined clubs, I launched a small online store, selling custom phone accessories I designed myself. By graduation, I had made nearly $2,000. Not much in the grand scheme, but for me, it was proof that I could generate real value. Despite my reluctance, I enrolled in a local college to appease my parents. One semester was all it took to realize I didn't belong there. The structured environment felt suffocating, and the business courses were taught by professors who had never started a company themselves. When I told my parents I wanted to drop out and focus on my projects, the arguments lasted for days. My father's face would turn red with anger. "You'll ruin your life. No child of mine will waste their potential working minimum wage jobs for the rest of their life." Quote still, I left college at 19, armed with only $2,000 saved from my side hustles. The first months were brutal. I rented a tiny studio in a run-down neighborhood where you didn't leave laundry in the machine. Past dark, I survived on ramen noodles and discount groceries, working 18-hour days to grow my e-commerce ventures. The first 3 attempts were disasters. A dropshipping business collapsed when suppliers sent defective products. My social media management service burned out under the strain of underpricing and too many clients. A handmade jewelry line couldn't scale beyond local craft fairs. Each failure was painful but invaluable. I learned supply chain management, client contracts, and scalability the hard way. The turning point came when I met Maya, a seasoned entrepreneur nearly 20 years older than me, at a local networking event. She saw potential where my family only saw rebellion. Maya became the mentor I desperately needed, teaching me real-world business skills without judgment some people learn by doing, not sitting in classrooms. She told me with her guidance. I refined my ideas and launched a platform, connecting small, independent artisans with customers across the country. The first months were grueling. I turned half my tiny apartment into an office, sleeping on a futon that doubled as a couch. I handled everything from coding the website to customer support. The breakthrough came 8 months in, when a popular lifestyle blogger featured one of our artisan partners. Orders poured in, revenue spiked, and I finally felt the rush of small-scale success. I called my parents to share the news. My father's skepticism was immediate. "That's nice, but it's probably temporary. You can always go back to college." His words stung, but instead of discouraging me, they fueled my determination. I would prove them wrong, not with arguments, but with undeniable results. Over the next 5 years, my platform, which I called Southern Craft Collective, grew from a handful of partners in a few states to over 400 artisans nationwide. Our office expanded, employees were hired, and revenue hit millions. I quietly supported my family financially, helping with medical bills and personal emergencies, but kept my full success hidden. They still assumed I was barely scraping by. Then came the moment I had anticipated for years. My father's 65th birthday dinner. I had purchased a small gift for him and planned to reveal the truth about my business. But when I shared that my company was now worth millions, I was met with disbelief, criticism, and outright insults. Uneducated trash. He called me and told me to leave his house. I drove away heartbroken, realizing something in our family dynamic had permanently broken. My worth, my achievements, my sacrifices, they meant nothing to them if I didn't follow the path they had prescribed. I retreated to a beach house I had purchased in Florida, turning it into a personal sanctuary. There I focused on healing, building authentic relationships, and running my business remotely. For the first time in my life, I felt free from the constant need for approval. I created a scholarship to help students who, like me, had entrepreneurial drive, but lacked traditional academic credentials. Weeks later, my family discovered the full extent of my success through a local news feature. My mother's texts and my father's calls arrived, but they carried pride only superficially. Failing to acknowledge the hurtful past, I realized I no longer needed their validation. My chosen family, my friends, my team, and the lives I had impacted through my work became my true support system. This was the lesson I had learned. Success and self-worth cannot be dictated by others. Even family forgiveness does not require forgetting or accepting abuse. It simply means freeing yourself and setting boundaries. And for the first time in years, I felt at home, not just in a house, but in my life. After leaving my father's house that night, I felt a strange combination of relief and grief. Relief because I was no longer trapped under his constant judgment. Grief because the family I had known, my parents, my siblings, had rejected me at my moment of triumph. But life doesn't pause for heartbreak. My business was growing, and I had no choice but to dive in completely. The first challenge was scaling Southern Craft Collective without losing the personal touch that had made it successful. Each artisan partner had a unique story, a craft passed down through generations, and I wanted to honor that. I spent countless nights personally answering emails, negotiating fair pricing, and even photographing products myself. At times it felt impossible. There were moments when I cried over my laptop, exhausted and unsure if I could keep this up. But every positive review, every note from a grateful artisan, reminded me why I started. Money became both a blessing and a burden. I could finally afford a proper office, hire employees, and expand our marketing. But with growth came complexity: inventory management, shipping, logistics, and customer service. Complaints consumed hours each day. I had to learn fast or fail fast. I made mistakes, sending the wrong orders, missing payments to some artisans. But each failure became a lesson. I realized leadership was not about being perfect. It was about taking responsibility and improving. Meanwhile, my siblings continued on their traditional paths. Noah became a software engineer and Sophie a lawyer. Our paths rarely crossed, and when they did, I could sense the subtle tension. My success had shifted the family dynamics. I was no longer the obedient child. They couldn't ignore that I had achieved what they thought impossible. But admiration was complicated by resentment. They seemed unwilling to celebrate my victories. Genuinely, despite this, I found allies outside my family. Maya continued to mentor me, introducing me to investors, connecting me with mentors in the artisan and e-commerce industries. I met Robbie, a logistics specialist, who helped streamline shipping nationwide, saving us thousands of dollars each month. Slowly, my business transformed from a chaotic, passion-driven project into a structured, scalable company. At the same time, I faced personal challenges. The emotional wounds left by my family's rejection festered. I found myself questioning, was success enough if it didn't come with love and acceptance? Could I be proud of achievements that my parents dismissed or mocked? Therapy helped, but it was the first real sense of emotional labor I had done for myself. I started journaling, meditating, and creating boundaries that my family had never respected before. Then came the public recognition. A national magazine featured Southern Craft Collective as one of the fastest growing artisan platforms in the US. Orders skyrocketed. And for the first time, I had to step back from day-to-day operations. To manage growth, I hired a small executive team, giving them autonomy to make decisions, while I focused on vision and strategy. This shift was terrifying. I feared losing control. But I knew I couldn't do everything alone. At this stage, my father unexpectedly reached out. The call was awkward and stiff. He wanted to meet to talk about the business. I agreed cautiously when we met. He barely looked at me, instead focusing on numbers and logistics. "I don't understand why you didn't listen before," he said. His tone was cold, almost analytical. I realized then that he didn't want a relationship. He wanted proof that my success wasn't a fluke. I calmly shared key milestones, revenue figures, and our expansion plans. He nodded, made no apology, and left. That was the last time I sought his approval. While some doors closed emotionally, others opened unexpectedly. I became close with a few artisans who reminded me of the people I wanted to serve. Not the people who judged me for taking risks. Their trust, gratitude, and loyalty became my true measure of success. I invested in mentorship programs for young female entrepreneurs, offering scholarships, workshops, and one-on-one guidance. I wanted others to feel the empowerment I had fought so hard to find. Business growth was not linear. A sudden warehouse fire nearly destroyed months of inventory. A major platform update caused our website to crash during peak holiday sales. Each crisis felt catastrophic at first, but I had learned to adapt. I rebuilt the warehouse, implemented redundant systems, and hired its specialists to prevent future failures. Every challenge hardened my resilience, proving to myself that I could survive anything without needing my family's validation. By the time I turned 27, Southern Craft Collective had become a multi-million-dollar business with partners in over 45 states. I moved into a new home reflecting my personal style, not dictated by anyone else's expectations. My friends, team, and chosen mentors were my family now. The sense of pride I felt was different from what I had imagined as a teenager. It was quieter, more stable, and far more satisfying. Yet I never fully healed from the early family betrayal. Seeing my father at social events, boasting about my daughter's achievements, while pretending to be the supporter he never was, still hurt. I chose to limit interactions, focusing on those who truly mattered in my life. Forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about reclaiming my peace. And slowly over time, I realized something powerful. Success is not just about wealth or recognition. It's about creating a life where your values, your work, and your relationships align. It's about proving to yourself, not anyone else, that you are enough. That year, I looked out at my studio balcony, overlooking the city skyline. The air smelled faintly of rain and the faint hum of late-night traffic. I felt a sense of calm I had never known as a child, teenager, or even young adult. For the first time, I wasn't chasing validation. I wasn't seeking approval. I was finally free. The following year, I faced what would become the biggest turning point in my life. Southern Craft Collective had grown to the point where national retailers were reaching out, offering partnerships, and even acquisition opportunities. I had a choice: sell and secure instant financial security, or continue building the brand I loved brick by brick. My first instinct was hesitation. I had spent so many years proving I could succeed on my own. Could I trust myself to make the right decision? Then an unexpected opportunity arose. Maya introduced me to Elena, a seasoned investor who specialized in scaling ethical artisan businesses. Elena didn't just offer money. She offered mentorship, strategic insight, and a network that could transform my business globally. After weeks of careful discussions, planning, and projections, we agreed on a partnership that would keep Southern Craft Collective independent but fully supported for international expansion. That decision changed everything. Around the same time, my father attempted another reconciliation. This time, he sent a long email filled with vague apologies and self-justifications. I read it twice, then deleted it. There was no need to engage. I had already reclaimed my power. And realized that closure didn't come from someone else's words. It came from my own acceptance and strength. On a personal level, I finally allowed myself to explore life beyond work. I had avoided romantic relationships for years, fearing vulnerability or distractions from my goals. But in the quiet moments of evenings, spent in the office after the last shipment was packed, I met Alex, a photographer, who shared my love for storytelling through images. Our connection was easy, warm and grounded in mutual respect. For the first time, I experienced partnership without fear or judgment. Despite this happiness, challenges never fully disappeared. A sudden trade policy change threatened some of our artisan imports, and a major client temporarily suspended orders due to an internal scandal. Each time I reminded myself I had survived rejection, betrayal, and financial uncertainty. I could survive this too. Working with my team, we diversified our supply chain, strengthened relationships with artisans, and invested in better risk management. Every crisis reinforced my belief that growth came from resilience, not luck. As Southern Craft Collective entered its 5th year, the impact of our work became evident. Young women entrepreneurs began reaching out for mentorship, inspired by our model of ethical growth and empowerment. Artisans reported increased stability in their families and communities for the first time. I saw success not as personal validation, but as a ripple effect proof that perseverance, integrity, and care could create lasting change. By now, I had truly built a life on my own terms. I moved into a home that reflected my style. Bright, minimalist, and filled with plants and handcrafted decor. My morning routine included yoga, meditation, and reviewing emails. But there was space for quiet reflection and personal growth for the first time in years. I felt fully present in my own life. Then came a symbolic moment of triumph. A major artisan showcase invited Southern Craft Collective to present at an international conference. Standing on the stage, seeing the applause from hundreds of industry leaders, and hearing young entrepreneurs describe how our story inspired them, I felt a surge of pride, unlike anything I had experienced before. This was not about proving my father wrong or seeking fame. This was about witnessing the tangible impact of hard work, vision, and authenticity. Looking back, I understood that my journey had been as much about inner transformation as external achievement. Leaving my family had been painful but necessary. Building a business from scratch had tested every limit, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Facing betrayal, rejection, and systemic challenges had forged resilience I never knew I possessed. And along the way, I had discovered the power of creating a chosen family, a network of mentors, friends, partners, and allies who nurtured, supported, and celebrated me genuinely. By the end of that year, Southern Craft Collective had become not just a thriving business but a symbol of possibility. I had achieved the financial independence, respect, and recognition I had once sought from my family. But with one crucial difference: I had built it for myself on my own terms, guided by my own values. Sitting in my office one late evening, I reflected on the long journey, the fear, the tears, the relentless hustle. It had all been worth it. I had turned rejection into fuel, obstacles into lessons, and independence into empowerment. I smiled, knowing that no matter what came next, I had the strength, wisdom, and courage to face it. And in that quiet, self-assured moment, I finally felt free, not just from my past, but from the expectations of anyone but myself. The first few months in Florida became a study in rediscovery. I realized how much of my life back in Ohio had been measured against expectations. I never truly shared every morning. Walking barefoot along the soft sand, with Charlie bounding ahead, I felt a freedom I hadn't known was possible. It wasn't just the warmth of the sun. It was the absence of judgment, the silence of expectation. For the first time in my adult life, I could exist purely on my own terms. My mornings followed a deliberate rhythm. I would make coffee in my kitchen, the aroma mingling with the salty Gulf air, then check in on my team via video call. Unlike the chaotic early years, these conversations were strategic and collaborative. not frantic attempts to control every minor decision. The trust I had placed in my leadership team paid off. Our artisan partners received consistent communication. Clients were satisfied, and production schedules ran smoothly. For the first time, the business felt like a living ecosystem, rather than a constant battle. In those quiet mornings, I also dedicated time to reflection. I journaled extensively, documenting my journey, my fears and my triumphs. I wrote about the dinner with my father, the words that had cut deeper than any professional failure, and about the nights I had cried alone in my apartment, exhausted and unsure if I was making the right choices. Putting these feelings onto paper helped me separate the person I was from the person my family had tried to define me as. Social life in Naples unfolded differently than I expected. Friends and acquaintances didn't know me from high school, didn't have preconceived notions about what I should be doing. They only saw me as I presented myself: capable, curious, and driven. Dinner parties, casual coffee dates, and art gallery openings became opportunities, not just for networking but for genuine connection. Laughter replaced tension, and conversations were filled with shared ideas, rather than subtle judgment. I also invested time in personal projects I had long ignored. A small pottery studio opened downtown, and I signed up for classes. I wasn't particularly skilled. My first few pieces collapsed in the kiln, or cracked during glazing. But the process itself was meditative. It reminded me that not every effort needed to be perfect or profitable. I learned to value effort and enjoyment for their own sake, something my upbringing had never emphasized. Meanwhile, Southern Craft Collective continued to grow. We added a dedicated sustainability team, ensuring our products and supply chains adhered to the highest environmental standards. Partner artisans were provided workshops on financial literacy and business operations. I realized that my original goal, to help small American manufacturers thrive, was evolving into something bigger. I wasn't just building a business. I was building an ecosystem of support, education, and opportunity. Of course, setbacks appeared. A hurricane swept through the Gulf Coast, temporarily disrupting deliveries and threatening our warehouse inventory. Shipping delays caused frustration among some customers, and a few artisanal partners expressed anxiety about cash flow. But rather than panic, I leaned on the systems I had painstakingly developed. Automated communications reassured clients. Emergency funds covered temporary shortfalls. And the artisan community banded together to support one another. By the time the storm passed, we had not only survived, but strengthened relationships through transparency and resilience. During this period, I also revisited the scholarship fund I had established at the community college. Selecting students for mentorship was humbling. These young entrepreneurs were passionate, creative, and ambitious, yet lacked traditional support. I saw in them the same drive that had propelled me from a tiny studio apartment to a multi-million-dollar business. Guiding them, hearing their triumphs and failures reminded me why I had chosen independence, not for wealth alone, but for the ability to create impact. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, in a brilliant streak of oranges and purples, I reflected on the changes in my life. The house was no longer a temporary retreat. It had become a sanctuary. Each room reflected my taste, my values, and my identity. Charlie slept at my feet, the gentle rhythm of his breathing comforting. I realized that my success had taught me something fundamental. Happiness isn't tied to external approval. It comes from authenticity, connection, and purpose. Then came a surprising turn. My father sent a handwritten note. Unlike his emails or texts, this was tactile, deliberate, and personal. He didn't apologize fully, but he acknowledged awareness of his harsh words and expressed a cautious interest in understanding me as an independent adult. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I read the note several times, reflecting on the long journey that had led me to this moment. By the end of the year, I found a balance I had never experienced before: work, personal growth, social life, and philanthropy coexisted in harmony. Southern Craft Collective had become a national brand, recognized not just for its products, but for its integrity, innovation, and support of small businesses. My life, once defined by the expectations of others, was now defined by my choices, my vision, and my values the following spring. Southern Craft Collective began gaining national attention. Features in magazines and podcasts highlighted the company's unique combination of artisanal quality and ethical business practices, while public recognition brought satisfaction. It also introduced unexpected pressures. I found myself navigating a new landscape of expectations, both from the media and from aspiring entrepreneurs seeking advice or mentorship. Despite the growing attention, I insisted on keeping the company culture personal and grounded. Quarterly retreats for our artisan partners became a ritual. We shared meals, brainstormed ideas, and celebrated successes together. Watching skilled hands at work, hearing stories about family traditions preserved through craft, I realized that the business had evolved into more than a revenue generator. It was a community, a shared purpose, and a living heritage. However, not everything was seamless. One afternoon, a longtime supplier sent a sharply worded email expressing concern over new pricing policies. Tensions escalated quickly. I spent hours mediating, reviewing contracts, and finding creative solutions that preserve trust while keeping the business sustainable. The situation was a reminder. Growth demanded not only vision, but diplomacy, patience, and sometimes humility. As recognition grew, so did my influence. Invitations arrived to speak at conferences and workshops, often alongside industry leaders I had admired for years, standing on stage, sharing my story from my humble beginnings to the success of Southern Craft Collective. I felt the same nervous energy I had once experienced, presenting to skeptical clients. Only now the audience didn't judge my competence. They sought inspiration. Their questions about entrepreneurship, resilience, and balancing work with personal life challenged me to articulate lessons I had lived but rarely verbalized amid professional challenges. My personal life expanded as well. I formed close friendships with people who shared my values. People who weren't invested in my past, but interested in my present and future. We spent weekends exploring Florida's natural beauty, kayaking through mangroves, and hiking along sun-drenched trails. These moments of connection reinforced a truth I had learned through struggle: relationships thrive on authenticity, not obligation. Meanwhile, my family dynamics remained complex. I reconnected with my younger sibling, who had watched from afar as I navigated my journey. Their relationship was tentative at first, fraught with unspoken resentment and old misunderstandings. But through patient conversations and shared projects, we began to build a bridge of trust. I discovered that offering guidance without judgment and support without condescension allowed old wounds to slowly heal. The distance from my father's harsh judgments also proved liberating, though he occasionally reached out with ambiguous statements. I no longer sought his approval. The power dynamics had shifted. My life was no longer tethered to his opinions, and each day reinforced the value of self-defined success. In parallel, the business introduced a new initiative, Southern Craft Labs, a program designed to foster innovation among artisans by providing access to modern technology and materials without compromising traditional methods. Watching artisans experiment with new techniques, seeing the spark of creativity in their eyes, reminded me why I had chosen this path. The joy of empowerment, the thrill of discovery, and the pride of preserving culture while encouraging growth. By mid-year, the company faced its first major public challenge. A competitor launched a campaign that attempted to discredit our product's authenticity. Initially, the news sparked anxiety within the team, but I used it as an opportunity to reinforce our principles: transparency, consistent quality, and direct communication with our customers became our response. Rather than engaging in public disputes, we doubled down on our mission and values. Over time, the controversy subsided, and our community emerged stronger, more loyal, and more connected than ever. On a personal note, I began exploring creative outlets beyond the business. Writing became a regular habit, and I experimented with short essays, reflecting on entrepreneurship, resilience, and personal growth. Some of these essays were published online, and readers shared messages of gratitude claiming my words had inspired them to pursue their ambitions despite fear or doubt. Each message reminded me that success wasn't measured solely by profit, it was measured by impact. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on the evolution of my life. From the isolation of Ohio, burdened by familiar judgment, to a thriving recognized entrepreneur in Florida. The journey had been arduous but transformative. Challenges had tested my resilience. Failures had taught humility. Victories had fostered gratitude. And through it all, I had maintained the core principle that guided me. Authenticity. Every decision, every risk, every connection had been filtered through the lens of being true to myself. Looking forward, new horizons beckoned. Expansion into international markets was on the table. And the idea of publishing a memoir began to take shape in my mind. A detailed account of the struggle, growth, and triumph that defined my path. I realized that the narrative wasn't simply about building a business, but about redefining identity, reclaiming autonomy, and demonstrating the power of perseverance in the face of adversity. The following year marked a turning point for Southern Craft Collective, with domestic operations running smoothly. My team and I began exploring international opportunities. While the thought of expanding overseas was exciting, it brought a new set of challenges. Unfamiliar regulations, cultural differences, and the logistics of shipping handmade goods across borders. I flew to Italy first, where we had identified a partnership with artisans in Tuscany. The rich tradition of craftsmanship there was both inspiring and humbling. Meeting the artisans in person, seeing their attention to detail, and hearing the stories behind each creation reinforced a truth I had internalized years ago. Entrepreneurship is about connecting people and preserving culture, not just generating revenue. Back in Florida, the international expansion plan required a careful balance between growth and maintaining the values that had made Southern Craft Collective successful. I spent hours on calls with translators, lawyers, and logistics coordinators, negotiating terms that would be fair to both the artisans and our customers. It was complex and exhausting, but the thrill of seeing tangible results made it worth every sleepless night. As the business grew globally, my personal life also evolved. I became more comfortable establishing boundaries and prioritizing self-care. Morning walks on the beach remained sacred, as did the quiet hours spent journaling and reflecting. Charlie and Luna, my rescue dogs, became a comforting presence during stressful moments. Their simple affection, a grounding force amidst complexity. Family contact remained sporadic. My mother occasionally called, her tone warm but cautious, always careful not to overstep boundaries I had set. My father sent the occasional email, filled with updates about Ohio, our distant congratulations. I responded politely, but without engaging in past disputes. Over time, I realized that healing didn't require forgiveness from them. It required acceptance of the reality that some relationships could never fully meet my expectations. The scholarship program I had established at my old community college gained traction. Applicants wrote passionate essays about their entrepreneurial ideas, often highlighting the ways traditional education had failed to support their creativity. Meeting some of these students virtually, offering guidance, and watching them take the first steps toward launching their own ventures brought a profound sense of fulfillment. Unlike my family, these students valued and celebrated my achievements without judgment. Their growth reminded me why I had pursued this path. Despite early criticism, impact matters more than approval. Mid-year, a situation arose that tested both my business acumen and my personal ethics. One of our international partners requested exclusivity for their designs, threatening to withhold production unless we complied. The negotiation was delicate. Agreeing could alienate other artisans. Refusing could damage a promising relationship. I consulted my leadership team, weighing long-term implications over short-term gain. In the end, we crafted a compromise that satisfied both parties, preserving trust and ensuring fairness. It was a reminder that leadership is rarely simple. It's often about balancing competing interests while staying true to core values. While international expansion continued, Southern Craft Collective received recognition in industry awards for innovation and social impact. I traveled to London for a ceremony, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. standing among global leaders, reflecting on the years of struggle. From that tiny apartment in Columbus to a thriving international business, I realized how far I had come. Every failure, every moment of doubt, had built resilience that no classroom could ever teach. At home, the beach house had fully transformed into a sanctuary that reflected my values. Each room told a story. Handcrafted furniture from American artisans, artwork reflecting global cultures, and personal touches that made the space feel alive. I had grown to appreciate solitude, not as loneliness but as freedom. The freedom to craft a life aligned with my own priorities, free from the judgment and expectations that had constrained me for so long. By the end of the year, I had learned an invaluable lesson. Success is not defined solely by wealth or recognition, but by the ability to live authentically, support others meaningfully, and cultivate relationships based on respect, rather than obligation. My professional achievements had created a platform to empower others. My personal growth had fostered inner resilience. And my chosen community friends, mentees and partners provided a sense of belonging I had never experienced in my family of origin. The following months were some of the most challenging I had ever faced. As an entrepreneur, Southern Craft Collective had grown into an international business. But with growth came complexity, new logistics challenges, time zone differences, and increasing customer expectations tested not only my business strategies, but my patience and leadership skills. One particularly difficult situation involved a delayed shipment from one of our European partners. A batch of handcrafted ceramics, meant for a major seasonal launch in the US, arrived damaged. I immediately coordinated with our quality control team, shipping companies, and customer service to minimize the impact. Overnight, I drafted apology emails, organized refunds, and arranged replacement shipments. I barely slept that week, surviving on cold coffee and the determination not to let the artisan's hard work go to waste. The incident reminded me that growth always comes with unforeseen obstacles, and sometimes leadership means absorbing responsibility for things beyond your control. Meanwhile, my philanthropic efforts, through the Amanda Wilson Entrepreneurship Scholarship, expanded. I worked closely with the selection committee to ensure we were identifying students not only with creative ideas, but with grit, the kind of resilience I had needed at their age. By this time, we had received hundreds of applications from students across the country. Some were high schoolers, others had already launched small ventures, and a few were even pursuing college reluctantly, unsure if traditional education suited their goals. Reading their stories, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each success they achieved felt like a ripple effect of my own journey, proof that my struggles were meaningful, not just for me but for others following a similar path. At home, the beach house continued to evolve into a reflection of my values and personality. I had added a small studio for creative projects, painting, pottery, and even experimenting with woodworking. I found that engaging in these activities helped me decompress after long days of strategic meetings and international calls. Charlie and Luna seemed to sense my moods, curling up near my feet during focused work sessions, or offering playful nudges when I spent too long isolated. The simple rhythms of domestic life became a grounding force, balancing the high-stakes environment of business leadership. Yet even as life in Florida flourished, memories of that fateful birthday dinner in Ohio lingered. I thought often about the emotional weight I had carried for years, the silent frustration, the disappointment, the constant effort to gain approval that was never freely given. Therapy with Dr. Richardson remained a vital support. Through our sessions, I explored how early family dynamics had influenced my self-perception, my work habits, and even my approach to generosity. I realized that I had often used financial support as a way to earn validation, unconsciously tying my worth to how much I could give. This recognition allowed me to recalibrate my approach to relationships, prioritizing healthy boundaries and mutual respect over obligation or expectation. One afternoon, I received an unexpected message from a former high school classmate, Alex, who had read an article about Southern Craft Collective. Alex had been pursuing a conventional corporate career, but had grown increasingly frustrated with the rigidity of the path. In his message, he asked if I would mentor him in launching a small, online store. I was struck by how much influence my journey had unintentionally had on others. I agreed, remembering Sophia, the mentor who had changed my trajectory years ago. This reminded me that mentorship, even when unplanned, could create meaningful impact far beyond what I had imagined. The summer brought another challenge: managing remote operations across multiple continents while maintaining a cohesive company culture. I realized that success was no longer just about sales or growth metrics, it was about sustaining the human connections that made the business meaningful. I began scheduling regular culture calls where team members shared successes, challenges, and personal milestones. Surprisingly, these sessions improved both productivity and morale. Employees felt seen and valued, reinforcing a culture of respect and collaboration that I had always envisioned. Around this time, news came that one of our philanthropic projects, partnering with artisans in rural Appalachia, had inspired a local school district to introduce entrepreneurship workshops. Teachers reported that students were more engaged and creative, inspired by the stories of real business owners making tangible impacts. I felt a quiet pride, knowing that the work I had once been told was frivolous had ripple effects reaching classrooms and young minds thousands of miles from my office. Despite these achievements, personal reflection often led to moments of melancholy. I realized that some wounds from my family's judgment would never fully heal. My father's words, though now less consuming, still lingered in the background. Yet I had learned to separate their inability to recognize my worth from the value I placed on myself. Freedom did not mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming power over my narrative. By the end of the year, Southern Craft Collective had doubled its revenue, with operations spanning North America, Europe, and a handful of Asian markets. The team had grown to over 70 employees, with a robust internship program supporting young entrepreneurs. The scholarship program had provided mentorship and funding to more than 20 students, many of whom had launched ventures of their own. I reflected on how far I had come, from the small apartment in Columbus, surviving on ramen noodles, to leading a multi-million-dollar international enterprise while maintaining a life rooted in authenticity, creativity, and care. And yet, the most significant transformation was internal. I had learned to embrace my success without apology, to engage in generosity without expectation, and to cultivate relationships that were chosen rather than enforced. I had discovered that self-worth could never be purchased or validated externally. It could only be nurtured through integrity, resilience, and commitment to one's own values. As Southern Craft Collective stabilized its global operations, new opportunities began to emerge, some entirely unexpected. One morning I received an email from Eleanor Brooks, a prominent curator at the Museum of Contemporary Design in London. She had come across our handcrafted ceramics line and was intrigued by the story behind our artisans and sustainable practices. Eleanor proposed an exhibition collaboration, a month-long showcase featuring Southern Craft Collective's creations alongside contemporary designers from across Europe. The idea was both thrilling and intimidating. While we had participated in local craft fairs and online showcases, this would be the first international, museum-level exhibition. I poured hours into planning, logistics, curating collections, and preparing narrative materials about the artisan stories. When the exhibition opened, the response was overwhelming. Critics praised the blending of traditional craftsmanship with modern aesthetic sensibilities. Visitors lingered, fascinated not just by the pieces, but by the narratives of resilience, creativity, and collaboration that each item represented. This recognition opened doors I had never imagined. Invitations to speak at design conferences, entrepreneurial summits, and universities poured in. Initially, the thought of public speaking filled me with anxiety. I had always been more comfortable behind the scenes, managing operations and mentoring from a distance. Yet, I realized that sharing my story could inspire others, just as my mentors had inspired me years ago. I embraced the opportunity, practicing diligently, and over time, I found my voice. I could speak confidently about entrepreneurship, philanthropy, and personal growth, without feeling like I was boasting. Meanwhile, business partnerships expanded. A well-known European boutique chain proposed a limited edition collaboration with our artisans, integrating Southern craft collective pieces into their seasonal collections. Negotiations were meticulous, requiring careful consideration of pricing, branding, and cultural representation. The experience sharpened my skills in international business strategy, legal compliance, and cross-cultural negotiation. More importantly, it reinforced the principle that every partnership must align with core values. Financial gain alone could never justify compromising integrity or authenticity amid these external developments. I also focused on internal growth. I introduced mentorship programs within the company, pairing experienced employees with newer hires. This created an environment where knowledge flowed freely, and employees felt empowered to take initiative. Team members began experimenting with innovative designs, sourcing sustainable materials, and exploring new market trends. I watched as creativity flourished, realizing that my role had shifted from hands-on problem solver to facilitator of talent and vision. Travel became another dimension of expansion. I visited artisan communities in Southeast Asia, exploring ways to support local economies while preserving cultural heritage. I spent weeks living among the communities, observing traditional techniques, and discussing sustainable business models with local leaders. These trips were humbling and enlightening. I witnessed firsthand the challenges faced by small-scale artisans: limited access to markets, scarce financial resources, and sometimes cultural undervaluation of their craft. I returned home with renewed determination to create platforms that amplified their voices and protected their work from exploitation. At home, the beach house evolved. Alongside these professional adventures, I built a small greenhouse and began experimenting with hydroponic gardening. Finding satisfaction in cultivating food and flowers from scratch, the house became a sanctuary where creativity, business strategy, and personal life intersected harmoniously. Charlie and Luna, now older but no less playful, often joined me in the garden, chasing butterflies or curling up in the sunlight. The rhythms of daily life, simple yet profound, provided grounding, reminding me of the balance between ambition and well-being. Public recognition also came in the form of media. Features, lifestyle magazines, podcasts, and entrepreneurial platforms began highlighting Southern Craft Collective in my journey. Each story focused not only on business success, but also on the human elements behind it. The artisan's dedication, the ethical sourcing practices, and the transformative power of mentorship. I accepted interviews selectively, emphasizing authenticity over hype. It was important to me that our narrative remained honest and inspiring, not sensationalized for clicks or temporary fame. Despite the accolades and growing responsibilities, introspection remained a cornerstone of my journey. I often reflected on the events that had shaped my trajectory: the birthday dinner in Ohio, the doubts cast by family, and the mentors who had seen potential where others saw none. Each challenge had contributed to resilience. Each success had deepened empathy and responsibility. I realized that my story was not simply about business. It was about purpose, legacy, and the interconnectedness of effort, integrity, and compassion in quiet moments. I thought about the students benefiting from the Amanda Wilson Entrepreneurship Scholarship. Letters poured in, describing how funding and mentorship had helped them launch ventures, pursue education, or develop creative skills. Reading these messages, I understood that impact was measurable, not just in revenue or recognition, but in the growth and confidence of others. Each success story reinforced a truth I had come to embrace: the journey was never solely about personal gain, but about fostering opportunities for others to thrive. As the year drew to a close, Southern Craft Collective had solidified its position as a global leader in ethical, artisan-driven commerce. Revenue had tripled. Our team had grown to nearly 100 employees, and partnerships spanned for continents. But more importantly, the company had established a reputation for integrity, mentorship, and innovation. Principles I had vowed to uphold from the beginning. And through it all, I maintained perspective. Wealth, accolades, and recognition were markers, not measures of fulfillment. True success lay in cultivating a life aligned with values, nurturing relationships that mattered, and making a lasting positive impact on the world. With Southern Craft Collective thriving, I found more space in my life for personal exploration. Travel, once a necessity for business, gradually became a source of inspiration and reflection. I took solo trips to remote corners of the world, not for luxury but to immerse myself in cultures, landscapes, and practices that broadened perspective. One memorable journey was to the highlands of Peru, where I trekked along the ancient Inca trails, hiking at dawn through misty valleys, surrounded by peaks that seemed to scrape the sky. I felt both insignificantly small and intimately connected to the world. Local artisans welcomed me into their workshops, teaching weaving and pottery, techniques that had been passed down for centuries. I marveled at their meticulous craftsmanship, understanding how every loop, stitch, and stroke carried centuries of knowledge and cultural memory. The experience reinforced my commitment to valuing tradition, patience, and authenticity, principles I applied daily in my business and personal life during these travels. I also explored creative hobbies that had long fascinated me but never received attention. I began sketching landscapes, experimenting with watercolor, and documenting moments in small journals. The act of creating without an audience or expectation brought unexpected joy and clarity. I discovered that reflection through art mirrored reflection in life, observing, interpreting, and transforming experiences into something tangible and meaningful back home. I continued cultivating community connections. I organized local workshops where young adults could learn craft skills, business fundamentals, and the importance of ethical entrepreneurship. Many participants came from challenging backgrounds, facing financial hardship or societal marginalization. Watching them gain confidence, develop ideas, and eventually launch small ventures was profoundly moving. I realized that the ripple effect of mentorship and empowerment extended far beyond financial metrics. It shaped character, resilience, and self-belief. Personal relationships deepened as well. Friends I had once lost touch with reached out, drawn back by curiosity or shared history. I made it a priority to nurture meaningful connections, hosting small gatherings, writing heartfelt notes, and maintaining open channels of communication. Romantic relationships, once sporadic and fragile, also evolved. I approached them with intentionality, emphasizing transparency, shared values, and mutual growth. I learned that love and partnership, like business, thrived when rooted in respect, communication, and patience. Amid these adventures, I faced challenges that tested both resilience and humility. A sudden economic downturn in Europe disrupted some of our international shipments, threatening partnerships and financial stability. I spent nights strategizing contingency plans, coordinating with teams across multiple time zones, and negotiating flexible terms with partners. The experience was exhausting, yet it underscored a vital lesson. Success was never linear. Challenges were inevitable, but the response measured, ethical, and solution-focused defined sustainability. Reflecting on my journey, I often returned to the pivotal moments that had shaped me: the birthday dinner in Ohio, my father's harsh words, the mentorship of Amanda Wilson. All of these experiences had forged a mindset that balanced ambition with empathy, tenacity with self-awareness. I realized that setbacks were not failures, but catalysts for growth, and that the most valuable lessons often arrived disguised as discomfort or disappointment. I also contemplated legacy. Southern Craft Collective had become more than a company. It was a living narrative of values, artistry, and empowerment. Yet I knew that tangible achievements alone would not define the impact I sought. Legacy, I concluded, was measured in the lives touched, opportunities created, and the culture of care embedded in every interaction. I envisioned a future where artisans worldwide could sustain themselves, students could chase ambitions unhindered by financial barriers, and communities could flourish through creativity and ethical commerce in quieter moments. I returned to the beach house, observing the ebb and flow of tides, the subtle colors of dawn, and the playful antics of Charlie and Luna. These moments of stillness grounded me, providing perspective that ambition alone could never offer. I journaled extensively, capturing insights about business, relationships, and personal growth. Reading old entries, I marveled at the transformation from a young adult, burdened by doubt and expectation, to someone capable of leading, creating, and inspiring. The lessons learned during this period were manifold. Persistence is non-negotiable. Long-term success demands consistent effort, resilience in the face of setbacks, and a willingness to adapt. Empathy enhances impact. Understanding others' experiences, challenges, and aspirations deepens influence and strengthens relationships. Integrity is a compass. Decisions guided by ethical considerations ensure sustainable growth and preserve trust. Reflection fuels clarity. Regular introspection and creative expression maintain balance, purpose, and mental resilience. Empowerment multiplies success. Investing in others, mentoring, and creating opportunities creates ripples that far exceed personal achievements. These lessons became guiding principles for every decision I made, both personally and professionally. I realized that while material success was gratifying, the true measure of accomplishment lay in the meaningful intersections of work, relationships, and self-awareness. As I prepared for the next phase of my journey, expanding Southern Craft Collective into new continents, supporting even more artisans, and nurturing creative initiatives, I felt a profound sense of readiness. The foundation built over years of challenge, reflection, and triumph provided stability, clarity, and purpose. I was no longer reacting to life. I was steering it with intention, empathy, and courage. By now, Southern Craft Collective had grown beyond what I had once imagined. What began as a modest attempt to showcase local artisans had evolved into a global network of creativity, commerce, and community. Branches and partnerships span continents, from the bustling markets of Southeast Asia to artisanal hubs in Europe and Africa. Yet despite expansion, the core philosophy remained unchanged: authenticity, empowerment, and meaningful human connection. The first step toward global expansion was carefully selecting partners who shared our values. I traveled extensively, meeting artisans, community leaders, and small business owners. Every meeting was a lesson in humility and insight. I learned to listen attentively, to understand not only their skills, but also their dreams and challenges. Together, we designed collaborative programs that allowed artisans to retain creative autonomy while gaining access to wider markets, fair compensation, and professional support. One of the most rewarding projects was the launch of the Artisan Mentorship Initiative. Under this program, experienced craftsmen mentored emerging talent, sharing technical skills, marketing knowledge, and cultural insights. I witnessed young artisans grow from hesitant beginners to confident creators, launching products that combine traditional techniques with contemporary design. Seeing their pride and independence reaffirmed why I had embarked on this journey. Success multiplied when shared. Amid professional growth, I did not lose sight of personal fulfillment. I continued traveling, but now trips served dual purposes: inspiration and contribution. In rural African villages, I participated in workshops teaching sustainable crafting techniques. In South American highlands, I funded programs that preserved indigenous weaving practices while introducing avenues for income generation. Every interaction, every lesson exchanged was a reminder of the interconnectedness of human experience in my personal life. Relationships matured alongside my career. Long-standing friendships deepened, romantic partnerships flourished, and family ties strengthened. My parents, who once doubted my path, began to witness not only the tangible success, but also the values guiding every step. Gradually, we reconciled. Our shared history, once marked by tension, became a foundation for understanding. Though the scars of the past remained, they were no longer burdens. They had become markers of growth and resilience. I also embraced new creative outlets. Photography, music, composition, and writing became ways to process experiences and communicate stories. I published essays and visual diaries, capturing artisans' lives, the beauty of natural landscapes, in the human pursuit of meaning. Audiences responded with appreciation and curiosity. reinforcing the idea that creativity was a universal language that transcended culture and geography. By the time Southern Craft Collective marked its 10th anniversary, the company was more than a brand. It was a symbol of possibility. We had launched scholarship programs, supported global artisan collectives, and initiated environmental sustainability projects to ensure ethical sourcing and minimal ecological impact. Employees and collaborators shared ownership of success, instilling a culture of accountability, respect, and shared purpose. Reflecting on the journey, I realized how far I had come from the uncertain young adult in Ohio, who once faced harsh judgment and doubt. Each challenge, mistake, and moment of self-doubt had been a stepping stone. My father's words, though painful, had ignited a determination that carried me through obstacles. Mentors like Amanda Wilson had provided guidance and encouragement. The small acts of kindness and collaboration along the way had compounded into transformative impact. Success, I understood, was multifaceted. It was not only about revenue, accolades, or public recognition. It was about the lives touched, the opportunities created, and the legacy of values embedded in every action. True fulfillment came from aligning purpose with passion, ambition with empathy, and achievement with integrity. In quieter moments, I still return to the beach house, observing tides, sunrise hues, and the playful antics of Charlie and Luna. These moments remain sacred reminders that, amidst growth, expansion, and responsibility, presence, reflection, and gratitude were essential. Journals full of reflections, sketches, and photographs became a personal archive of lessons learned, joy experienced, and connections forged. Ultimately, the journey had taught me that life's meaning is constructed through intentional action, courageous choices, and meaningful relationships. Southern Craft Collective was a testament to this philosophy, a living narrative of resilience, creativity, and empowerment. And as I looked for the future, I felt a profound sense of readiness, ready to continue expanding mentoring, exploring, and embracing the richness of human potential. In the end, the story was never just about business or personal success. It was about transformation, connection, and legacy. It was about taking what once seemed like obstacles and forging pathways that not only elevated oneself, but also elevated others. It was about the power of purpose, persistence, and the unwavering belief that even amidst adversity, one can create something enduring, beautiful, and meaningful.